Hello, everybody. It's Matt Feldman here with the IC Topic Chat. It is Thursday, July 29th, 2021. I'm in New Jersey today, and our topic of the day is called Growing Pains. It's a panel session, which I think I'd like to see more of. And we are joined by three independent independent consultants who have businesses that have grown, who have felt growing pains. And that involves Kurt Stuke, Iris Matthews, and Jessica Gibbons Benton. I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves, but just so you know how we're doing this today with the recording, if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're here with me present, what we intend to do is record about 35 minutes of the session today, and it'll be just some conversation that I'm having, or that each of these panelists had a chance to review some questions that I drafted up, kind of just, off the top of my head about things that I think would be interesting to ask them and get their reflections on. So they're going to be kind of reflecting on those questions, and we'll be engaging in some conversation about that, just the four of us. But about that time, I'll stop the recording and we're going to go into just an open-ended conversation and to see where everything goes. So with that, why don't we're going to go in order of what I can see on my screen. So Jessica, I'm going to ask you to kick it off and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your business, and talk about your some of the growth that you've seen. And then I'm going to move to Kurt, and then Iris, why don't you go third? So why don't you go ahead, Jessica?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Gibbons Benton, and I am one of three co-founders and owners of Elevate Consulting based in Nashville, Tennessee. And as you can hear, I do have a little bit of a head cold. Thankfully, I tested negative for the COVID. But yes, I do have a head cold. I may sneeze and blow my nose during this panel. Anyway, so a little bit about Elevate. We are primarily an evaluation firm, but we offer a number of other services around sort of learning and improvement. And we primarily work with nonprofits, some local foundations, and some collaborative efforts that are focused on systems change here in Nashville. So we identify as generalists in terms of our evaluation work. And we got started in 2016. Again, there are three owners, and we were all three working a full-time job. And we did our Elevate work as a side hustle for, I think, about 2 years before we made the leap. And then it was the three owners who were working full time, but we did end up having enough business to hire our first employee in the fall of 2019 and learned many lessons there, much growing pains. And then actually hired again in summer of 2020. So now we are sitting at a total of 6 people on our team. And that has been a little bit of a journey in terms of recruiting and hiring and things like that, that I'm sure we'll get into. I would say that our primary growing pain is around this idea of balancing our capacity. And as three owners who are program evaluators and love doing the project work, navigating the shift from all of our time being spent on project work to needing to spend more of our time in strategy and operations to lay a strong foundation for us to scale. That has been a challenge for us. And we also just struggle to keep up with like staff capacity just to do the jobs that we have, the jobs that are coming in. So I would say that's been our biggest sort of growing pain, and we continue to try to figure out how to navigate that every single day. So yeah, I'll stop there.
You want me to go? Okay, so I'm Kurt Stuke. I have a small business in San Antonio, Texas. We work in the education sector, both with higher ed and K-12 and nonprofits that serve public education. The funding for those agencies comes from national sources and state sources. So like National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health funds the government or funds the higher ed. and then they fund us. So we're always kind of the subcontractor on the efforts. My evolution pattern fit everyone else's. I was solo with consultants. I switched the strategy and went to full-time employees with consultants. And I lost both of my full-time employees. And I'm now at part-time with consultants and myself full-time. So my growing pain is turnover. And I had 2 people, and what that means is loss of corporate knowledge and that whole documentation of, oh my God, she's been using Canva and we don't have her password anymore. It's things like that, it's the corporate knowledge that we've lost. So grown, and I'm trying the strategy with part-time folks rather than full-time folks, just because they're all grad students. Okay, that's enough for me.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Iris Matthews. I'm up in Juneau, Alaska. It's a little ways away. It's still morning for me. I've been in business for 11 years now. My firm, the Stellar Group, does research, evaluation, planning projects, lots of different subjects. When I first started, like a lot of people, it was kind of I don't know what I'm doing and we'll see if this works, right? I was pregnant with my second child and, thought, well, I have a little flexibility to see and get myself up to full-time status. But I found myself working full-time really quickly. And within a few years, sort of seeing that I was capped at what I could do if it was just me, and noticing that these other larger firms were getting these like much cooler looking projects while I was doing like these more like fun and interesting projects, but like not the big ones that seemed like extra cool and extra complicated. And I really realized that I needed to start adding some capacity if I was going to be able to work at that next level where my brain was already going. But I was also about to move. So I was moving from one town in Alaska to another. So I had to kind of hold off a little bit and ended up doing this kind of moving and then trying to add staff and still having my home office and realizing really quickly that just wasn't really going to work very well. So one of my first big growing pains was getting office space and trying to figure out what kind of staff I should hire for the first time. Was it a part-time staff, full-time staff, contract? Like, what did that look like? And eventually landing on, no, I need like a full-time person that's a part of my team. And fast forward 5 years later, I've been through a couple staff and a couple different configurations of that, and was really starting to hit a growth stride last year. So Kurt, I feel you a little bit because I had 2 people. One moved right before COVID, but I kept her on staff. And then the other one was really not a great fit. And so I'd hired another person who was supposed to start, but I ended up losing, firing the one who wasn't a good fit and having the one that was supposed to be coming in decide not to join after all, taking another opportunity. So all of a sudden, tons of work and like no staff. So earlier this year, I added a mix of staff and contractors. I know 5 people on my team, but it was like a big leap to go from like the 2 of us that were left behind after all this like starting, not starting, new work coming in. And then we added 3 people to the team in 60 days and have just been kind of going full steam since then.
So I want to take a step back and say, first of all, I think a lot of this conversation for why we wanted to do a panel session was something that Ann Price brought up. So I want to give credit to her for this idea. And I think originally it was going to be just a conversation between like Ann and I, because we both felt lots of growing pains. We're super excited to involve you, all the 3 of you. But one of the pieces I'm hearing here, which was also a question I put out to you, was about your calculus for adding new employees. In my firm, we have, if you count the grad assistants, we have 8 people right now, which I was 1 person like 2.5 years ago. So it's kind of a mind bender to think that that's happened. And so the thing I've always tried to figure out, and I'd like to hear from all of you, I'm going to ask Iris to go first, then Jessica, and then Kurt. I want you to finish because I'd like to hear you guys talk about how you decide to bring in people, whether you're bringing them in as subcontractors or full-time, or you just go straight at full-time. What is your calculus for that? Is there a number figure? I've heard before people, once I have $150,000 in work, I hire a new person. I've heard that over and over again. Is that something that you're thinking about? And the reason I want you to talk about this, Kurt, because you've gone through this process and now you're in a different place. I'd like you to talk about what you're doing now. But Iris, why don't you take that question first? What is your calculus for hiring new people, and how do you consider these things?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I have a big spreadsheet and I stare at it. Like, do I have enough and can I sustain this? But I don't have a calculus, and I've sort of had to let go of that and just realize that my business grows every year and that my capacity for growth is constrained by my ability to hire staff, and that I can grow more if I want to. The work has always been there and always will be. And so it's a little bit of a leap of faith that I've had to just take, of knowing like, yeah, I have enough money to make it this far, and I'll have to trust that more work will come in that time. And that's never not happened. If anything, my inability to add staff at the rate I would like to has been my biggest constraint to growth.
Just a quick aside on that. I talked to my kids about this, and I am probably an optimist in many ways, and probably I get myself into more trouble than not. But I don't know how you can't be an optimist in this profession. If you're a complete pessimist, it would be difficult to take the chances that you kind of have to take on the faith that it's going to work out. Because if you believed everything was going to fail, how could you ever hire an employee if you felt like you were going to lose all your savings or something terrible was going to happen? But I think I actually find myself in the same place as you do, Iris, with hiring and anything I do. I take there's a lot of blind faith involved in optimism in what I do. What's your take on this, Jessica? How do you, and I should say, Jessica's in a very interesting situation where a lot of us are like one person shows who became bigger businesses. She's a 3-person show that became a bigger business. So she's balancing this with two, equal partners.
Yes, that is accurate. And one of us, of the 3 of us, one of us has a really high risk tolerance, and the other 2 are a little bit more conservative in terms of our risk tolerance. So we refer to that as our centrifugal force that keeps Elevate going. We also don't have a clear-cut sort of formula or calculus that we're doing. So far, our hiring has been reactive based on we have enough interest or jobs, and we don't want to turn people away, especially when we were younger, when the 3 of us had just quit our full-time jobs. We weren't trying to turn people away. So far our hiring has been reactive, and really our minimum was, do we have enough money in our nest egg to cover everyone's salaries for 4 months? Because 4 months seems like a long enough runway to convert leads that we have in the pipeline. In general, sometimes they take for flipping ever, which is another pain. But in general, 4 months seems to be our sweet spot. And we are in the process of trying to work with our finance team to come up with a more proactive approach to this, because like Iris was saying, really our inability to recruit and onboard good staff in a timely manner has definitely hurt our ability to grow in 2021. Our hiring process that I mentioned we went through took a really long time, and I didn't mention this part of the history, but we also had a similar experience where we hired 2 people full time, and one of them accepted another opportunity within her first 2 weeks. So we have had to replace that capacity with a subcontractor who has expressed directly that he's interested in full-time employment. So now we're kind of using this as an opportunity where we're bringing him in on some specific projects to see if he's a good fit. But anyway, so yes, we don't have that part figured out yet. It's reactive. We're trying to keep up, and our sweet, patient finance team is trying to help us come up with a way to do that more proactively.
Hold on, Kurt. There you
Got
go.
it. No, I'm muted. We don't have a specific rule for the finance part, but part of it is I now have a 10-month financial cushion on the business side. I can take risks personally because I'm of retirement age. And, financially, my wife and I are okay. So I can take more risks on the business side. So the business part, the financial part's not really a driver other than can I afford it without losing too much money this year? The other things are more of the metrics of, are we meeting deliverable due dates? I hate turning in late reports. And I just don't like going to my customer going, the quality of the work is the other thing. There's been times where I've had to hurry a report and it's not been at the detailed level that I'd like it to be. And those two are very important for me because 100% of my work is referrals. I rarely write a proposal as the lead agency to someone we don't know. It's literally all referrals. And so the quality of the work and meeting deadlines is very important to us. The fourth thing is employee stress level. I don't want to burn my employees out. My own, I'm working too many hours. I don't want to do that. And so when it gets to the point where I'm seeing stress in my employees, it's like time to bring someone in. The hard part that we have in projecting the finances is that we have grants that are ending this year. I've got 3 that are ending this year. We have the current work, and we currently have 24 proposals in for review. That bring us on board as the external evaluator. They're all small little things, but I have no idea how many are going to be awarded. I just found out this past week that 2 were awarded. So now it's like all of a sudden, okay, income's up, but income's down because of the grants that ended. And so the math for the finance part is way beyond my level of ability. And so I'm just going, yeah, look at the big picture. I've got enough financial cushion. I can bring them in now. And I'm trying it with graduate students, knowing that in 6 months to a year, they may be moving on, but I need someone now. And so that's the which ones are continuing, which ones are going to come on board. It's very difficult to do. So the quality of the work for me is very important in meeting the deadlines, the customer focus part.
So Kurt and I both have similar types of projects and work that we do. And I have, with a team, a decent sized team, about 30 existing projects that we have going on. But when I heard 24 potential proposals, I shuddered a little bit to think, holy cow, that's a lot to think. Now, I think that the reality with that, and I don't know all of your projects. I know some of them are do deal like mine, and you just really never know. But you're probably, and you also do a bit of NSF like I do, don't you, Kurt?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so
9
you're probably
NSF
talking
contracts.
about a third. At the high end, you'll have a half of those funded, but a third to a half is probably what you're thinking.
Probably. So many of mine are those little $5,000 and $10,000 gigs.
Yeah,
And so
like the
they add up. Yeah. We've got a couple of big ones. 3 of the proposals that are in are like 3/4 person time. So if 1, 2, or 3 of those come on, then I need to grow even that much more.
So this actually comes into that third question that I put to you guys, and the question is: do you pursue jobs when you don't have the labor to support the work? So maybe Kurt, you're already talking about that. So why don't you
Yes.
hit that question? So my answer is I don't know how I'm always going to staff it, but yeah, I do it because if I'm not constantly putting something into the pipeline, I'm not going to have things at the other end to keep me employed. But if it turns out, really well, then I'll figure out how to hire people. But
Jessica mentioned having other people with a differing opinion in her company. I have one, she's just moving from full-time to part-time because of health. And she wanted to come and heckle me today on some of my answers. And one of them is this one: do we say no when we're about pursuing new jobs? And we say yes. And my response to someone when they contact us about writing a proposal with them, I don't say yes, I say we're interested in learning more. So it gives me that opportunity to back out. I don't say yes, but tell me more about it. The reason I don't say no is I don't want to get the reputation of being one of these companies that's hard to work with, and they stop coming and asking me because my work is so much referral based. If I get the reputation of saying no for whatever reason, then they're going to stop coming back to me directly themselves, and they're not going to refer me. So we say yes, knowing that we're going to win maybe 10% of the grants proposals that we go in, maybe, that kind of thing. So I always say yes.
So Jessica, I'd like a clarification on your earlier kind of statement about hiring somebody. You said 4 months, and Iris responded back. Yeah, she thinks 4 to 6 months. Is that 4 months of existing salary? So I'm just throwing some numbers out there. Let's say you have 4, and you would need like $25,000 a month for all the people that you're looking at. And so you would need to have like $100,000 in the bank to kind of make that sort of a thing. Is that what you would need to have that in hand, or is that kind of contracted with expected receivables?
Well, I mean, we do have like a large enough nest egg banked that between that and our contracts that we already have in hand, that we believe we can count on that. That's kind of, we look at both of those things to determine how long our runway is, and we get monthly reports from our finance team about like, yeah, you're running at a shortfall and you have this many months to fix it, or you have a surplus. Great job. So that's kind of the feedback that we are looking at to understand. But when we when we made our first decision to hire a full-time employee, it was about, can we cover literally all of Elevate's expenses, including this new person's salary, for at least 4 months if we got no new work for a year, for 4 months, in order to have that on-ramp to try to convert some additional jobs. And everything that Kurt said, my business partner Amy has said like word for word. Like she has a true commitment to and belief that if we tell people we're booked actually, or we can't take that on right now, that will get around, because also our business is almost entirely word of mouth. And we do some training work at the top of our our sales funnel. That idea, we only sort of have one, and at the top of it is trainings. That's like our lowest cost thing. So we do get some that just come in through trainings, but by and large it's referrals and repeat customers. And Amy has a very strong commitment. So we built out a process where when a new opportunity comes, we always say, we would love to have a conversation with you. We do an initial client meeting where we ask some questions. And we don't tell people no. We tell people we would love to work with you, and here's when we would be available, is more how we frame it. I will say that we're not doing a lot of grant funded work. We have 2 right now that are grant funded, and we do occasionally get requests to be written into proposals. But most of our work are, they're nonprofit agencies or foundations that have budget in hand to do this work. So our hit rate is right at like 40 to 45% of the leads that come in the door end up converting. So we keep like 6 to 8 new opportunities in the pipeline. And when we have that many, we try to slow down in terms of sending Amy out there to talk to people, because she just can't help herself. That's just what she does, to try to sell our services. So we try to slow her down when we're already at like 8 or 9 opportunities. We're like, okay, I think let's give it a minute. Let's let some of these resolve. But anyway, so yes, we also absolutely are saying yes to things, and always have a conversation about how would we staff it, what capacity do we have available, and subcontractors are always on the table in that conversation. So yeah, we similarly are sort of on the yes side of things.
And Iris, I want to get to you in a second, but I saw Anne put a comment in the chat asking about Jessica to talk a little bit about who's on her finance team. And I was thinking finance team, that's me, right?
Yeah, I would love to
Me and
tell
my
you about
wife, that's it.
I would love to tell you about them because they're amazing. It is absolutely the best choice that we made was to hire a local accounting firm. They're like a small woman-owned shop here in Nashville. They were called Pen and Ledger, but they rebranded as either Vita or Vita. I actually couldn't even tell you. We still call them Pen and Ledger because that's how we met them. And so they are our bookkeepers essentially. And we, in addition to Pen and Ledger through them, we now have like a much better tax human. Our tax human before was awful, you guys. It's so hard because you don't know before you like go through the tax season with somebody, or at least that was our experience. Anyway, so now we have a better tax human who is much more patient and explains things to us and things like that. And between Pen and Ledger as our bookkeeper and our tax accountant, they've really helped us just get a handle on looking at our projections, looking at what is our gap, and what I talked about earlier of understanding what is your cost per employee and how can we think about that in relation to your rate to make sure that we're like scaling sustainably. So yes, they've been deeply helpful. They send all the invoices, stuff like that as well. They run payroll, etc.
I love how you talk
Ann.
about your CPA and your tax advice as the finance team. I'm going to start doing that because I definitely have a CPA. I tell my mentees, I've never hired an attorney, but I could not live without my CPA.
Yeah.
And my office manager does all my invoicing. But I had a question for Kurt too, Matt. Is this a good time to ask it? So Kurt, you talked a little bit about the churn, like you had 1099s, you had contractors, and you had employees, and now you're back to contractors. And you talked about like the loss of like industrial knowledge or corporate knowledge. It seems like you would lose that too, having graduate students, because they don't stay very long, is my experience. And so that's why I said in the chat, this is something Matt and I have gone off back and forth, because there was a time when right, Matt, you only had graduate students, right? And there's pros and cons to that. So I wanted you to kind of talk about that a little bit, maybe.
Give me a year and I'll let you know how it turns out.
Okay.
The ones that I have right now are not looking at academic positions.
Okay.
And so they've kind of got that, and Megan and Jessica have both talked about that, about looking at, going through the doc program and thinking academia, and then like, yeah. So I've actually offered both of them full-time after their PhD is complete. So hopefully I can keep the two primary ones on board after this. And I'm just trying to embed them into everything we're doing now. But the lesson learned with one of my full-time who got poached by another evaluation company. It's one that documenting things is the big thing. We have a big spreadsheet with project management with all the tasks that we need to do for all of our different contracts, including when we invoice. But I'm trying to document all those other little things like the passwords and the websites and things like that.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about SOPs because my business shift is that was definitely like, oh crap. Because I went from having contractors in the beginning to having employees, right? But they were always like super young. They get their experience. I have a lovely time growing them. Then they go off for better money, as they should. But that churn is really exhausting.
It is.
So now I've switched to a model of having hiring senior level evaluators that I can say, here's your project, go for it. Now, and I'm learning how to get my hands out of the weeds. So that's where that question was coming from.
Are they employees or are they contractors?
Now I have contractors.
See, the thing that I had when I was doing all consultant contractors is that under Texas laws, you can't direct them very much. You can hand them a project,
sure,
and so on. And I needed more day-to-day capabilities of directing their work. Meeting with them frequently, especially during the onboarding. And they were junior folks, so they needed the experience.
Yeah.
So I needed more hand-holding, and that's why I really wanted to go. I want to be, I don't want to say more controlling, but I wanted to be more controlling.
Yeah,
Um,
and I want to be less controlling, but you're absolutely right. There's Department of Labor laws that you have to think about as to whether or not somebody is actually an employee or a 1099. And now I'll hush
Yeah.
because Iris needs to probably get in here.
And actually, it's really good. And we talked about project management. If anybody's interested, last week that was our topic, and it was so fascinating. I had to leave, and everybody kept talking. And I have no idea how long they talked, but it was
Another
it was a good
15
one.
minutes.
Was it 15 minutes? So it obviously was just people were on the edge of their seats. Iris, there's several comments in the chat here, both from Lena and also ones that you want to talk about. So I guess the big question a lot of people are asking is, why would I want to do this? Let me give you a little quick, quick story. I'm talking with Kirk Nestis yesterday, and he's talking about a small business where it was not independent consulting, but this business had one shop, and they were successful, and they opened up a second one and a third one, and they had 4 all over this community. And he went to this owner and she said, why am I working so hard? Because I'm bringing home the same amount of money than I had with one shop, but now I'm so stressed out, and I don't get to do the things I started this, why I originally started doing this. And I don't know why I'm working so hard for the same amount of money. And I think that's a real concern for us when we're thinking about expanding our business and bringing in employees. And I guess the question that I think Lena was bringing up was, what was your decision to grow? Why are you not just one person? Why did you decide to allow it to get bigger than just the onesie twosie kind of operation? So I'd love Iris to talk about that. And Iris, I think you also want to talk about benefits.
Yeah, I saw that question in the chat, and it's a pertinent one for me right now. But I mean, I think I talked about this a little bit earlier. I decided to grow because I wanted more interesting work. And I would say that as a result of growth, I'm making a lot more money. I mean, I was making decent, good living before, but now my projects are more interesting, and I make more money than I used to. And I think I get to pay my employees fairly well. I mean, that's always a balance in there, but there are rewards for that. I saw someone had a question about benefits and employees versus chats, and employees versus contractors, and that, you know, contractors are cheaper, I think, a lot of the time, depending on who you're working with or if you have to pay them, you know. But there are barriers to using contractors, I've found, and some of them are that they're not always eligible to work on my projects. Sometimes I have to get special permissions to use them. And then I have to explain my whole structure and why they're trustworthy and what our long-term engagements are. And those are conversations that like detract from the overall competence of my firm. It's not necessarily the conversation I want to have with a potential client or a procurement officer or anybody about how I'm structuring my team. I just want them to have confidence that this is the team and this is how the work gets done. I also have a little more heartburn about a lot of my work is year over year. It's like, you know, 3-5 year projects that I'm doing with clients. And I have a little more heartburn about letting contractors have those relationships because they might go away. They might stay, but then am I sending them to conferences for those clients? And am I having them in all the meetings and managing these things? And then where does that leave me if they do go away because they're only working for me? And how much are they really going to work and contribute in the same way as an employee would? And then do I owe them bonuses too if they work really hard for me? Or should bonuses just be for my core staff? And contractors are just there to pick up the slack. So I've struggled a little bit with some of that, just in terms of even what I support for contractors versus my core staff, and then what benefit package makes Stellar a great place to work. We have for our benefits a simple retirement account with 3% matching. We have 5 weeks of leave. We have paid holidays. I added in health reimbursement accounts. I haven't been able, Alaska's like a really terrible healthcare marketplace. It's super expensive up here, and I cannot get a group health insurance plan to save my life that anybody can afford. It's actually cheaper to put them on the exchange, but that really freaks people out. And I have found as I've tried to hire higher level staff that becomes a barrier. Like people aren't even willing to like explore what it means to be on the exchange. They just instantly like, I live and work in the state capital, and they're like, no, I'll just stay with my state job because that's safe. And I understand that, and I can get dependent care if they have kids. And so that's something I'm really like looking at re-examining is there a better way? Maybe this is something I need to evaluate on a yearly basis. I'm adding paid parental leave in this year for the first time ever. I have a pregnant staffer, but it's also, I do a lot of work in early childhood, and it just feels inauthentic not to address what a giant systemic issue this is if I can afford to do so. So trying to think about what are the other benefits I can offer as well when I can't compete with some larger corporate infrastructure.
I just
So
threw
curious
some
what
things
other
in the chat. I don't know if these are the ones that you're talking about. You definitely talked about the simple IRA plan, the retirement account. And then I think you were referring to QSARA, where you
No,
provide a
it's
certain amount per
ICHRA.
month. Nope.
ICHRA is similar to QSARA, but QSARA has more limitations. So ICHRAs were
Okay.
new for 2020, individual healthcare reimbursement accounts. You can set your limits
Okay.
and classes for them.
Okay, so let's see, we're at 42 past the hour. I have some more questions, but people feel free to pop in here. One of the other questions I'm curious about is, your key performance indicators. I know, Jessica, you were talking about some of those, potentially about like when you bring in an employee, you need to see in your savings account, you guys have 4 months of savings that's going to support any kind of activity that you're doing. What are some other things that you're thinking about as far as key performance indicators, those KPIs?
Yeah, absolutely. The main ones that we watch currently are about capacity and the company's financial health. So right now, of course, we look at what revenue is coming in versus our actual and budgeted expenses, and what do our revenue projections look like, and are we tracking for a shortfall or a surplus? And we look at that monthly. We use just an Excel spreadsheet to project our bandwidth in terms of like hours that we have available on the team and how booked we are. And we use that one quite a bit, particularly when we're going around our centrifuge of the three of us trying to decide whether or not we're going to accept another job. Where Amy is like, it's fine. We can overbook ourselves a little. And Hannah and I are like, can we not do that? That would be great if we didn't do that. But we look at that a lot. And of course we track our real hours. We use Toggle, which I think is really common in the consultant community, to track our actual time spent. And we look at that versus our projected or budgeted hours on, by project, to understand, are we running hot or cool for specific projects, which helps us understand, are we like hitting our break-even rate, all that good stuff. And then the other one that we use is we do quarterly planning meetings with our full team. And at those meetings, we have a conversation about workload and balance. And so that there we're just getting some qualitative information about how are people feeling about their workload. And are we seeing some red flags around burnout? I appreciated this question because it made me realize that right now we don't have any indicators that we're like looking at around quality. And I think that the reason that we've gotten away with that so far is because we're still in a position where one of the three owners is on almost all of our projects. Like I think we only have 2 currently that don't have one of the owners on them. So since we're still in that consultant role, we're very much doing the project work. We have a direct tie to the quality on the projects, but we made the decision to try to grow out of a commitment to realizing this vision that we have for Elevate of being a little bit of a thought leader in the Southeastern United States, where the relationship between philanthropy and the social sector is still framed very much in terms of charity, and data can really be a gatekeeper. And we want to enter that conversation and have the credibility to do that and have the time to do that thought work. And so for us, we think that means we need a larger staff so that the owners are freed up to do that. So that's why we made the decision to grow. And as we do that, we definitely need some quality indicators so that as the owners step away from project work, we can have assurances that staff are still doing things like hitting deadlines, et cetera. So that was a good reflection of preparing my remarks today. So thanks for that.
Pop in here, Kurt or Iris, with any key performance indicators that you use.
Go for it, Iris.
Yeah, I mean, we similarly, I'm looking at revenue growth. We're looking at our overall projects. We just instituted last month kind of an after action review process for each of our projects, just to say like, hey, we're all new, we're all learning about this. So let's look at it. And we're still kind of fine tuning that process, but I think that is going to be really helpful for us because it's a place to have a conversation both about how did we do on budget, and then where were the hiccups? And the final question is like, would I work with this client again? Did we like this? Because I want to keep that sort of quality of life. Like the one thing I have not wanted to lose as we grow is to just have to kind of feed the machine. I always wanted to be able to be somewhat selective about who we worked with and not just have to do any old thing and say yes to everything. I want to say yes to the things that we want to do. And so I think trying to put that into part of our process and our kind of performance indicators of like, well, we did good work or we didn't do good work, and maybe because we didn't like it. And
Yeah,
let's hold ourselves accountable to those, kind of tying those back to our values and what we want to do.
Well, I definitely think this is interesting. I think when you're small, I have a problem with the phrase data-driven decision making, right? Because even with my clients, and this goes back to my work as an institutional research director, I never wanted anything to be completely data driven, and I was the data guy because I know all the faults in the data. So I think we have to be qualitative in our approach. And I always said data informed decision making, and I never liked it when people push that data driven thing in there. I'm going to ask one more question. Go ahead, Kurt.
I'm going to go in on that last one.
KPIs, yeah, hit us.
We don't have any major ones that are different than what Jessica and Iris did. We do postmortems. And one of the problems was we had a big one where I had one of my employees learn about dashboards, and we created dashboards. And so there was a lot of capacity building. So when you look at the hours that we spent on this one project, we got killed, just absolutely killed. But there's a lot of professional development in it and capacity building. So dashboards are now become part of our mainstream where they're needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of teasing out what was direct versus what was ours was the one issue. So that's our postmortem.
I will say this, and this is our experience, is totally aside, but everything we do, every report we put together, just about every even middle of the year kind of process evaluation kind of thing comes with a dashboard anymore. And that's just like a piece of what we do. And I think that's the way a lot of us are moving. So it's just something you should be thinking about. So I'm glad you brought up dashboards. I mean, Tom is like fantastic and amazing at them. And so I'm super excited to have him on my staff. And that's what we do because people love to interact with their data.
Iris has pointed out doing things that you want to do. For those of you that are NASA geeks, kids get to ask questions of the astronauts on the ISS and then they record them live. One of my projects did that yesterday, where the middle school kids had videotaped questions and the astronauts live yesterday, saw the videos of the kids and then answered them. How cool is that?
I just toured Endeavor Elementary School, a school that opened here in New Jersey in 2019. They will have the Endeavor chute, I am not exactly, but from the spacecraft itself in the middle of the lobby of the elementary school. How cool is that? But I mean, isn't that why we do program evaluation? Because we get to do all the fun things. We're not just trying to serve corporate greed here. This is about saving the world. I love that about program evaluation. I want to ask everybody one last question, and then I'm gonna shut down the recording function, and then just everybody at some point just pop in, ask questions. You don't have to do it just in the chat, and we'll just have this as an open conversation. But the last thing I want to ask that I give to you guys. What's something that you did that was painful at the time, but you're so happy you did? So let's see, Jessica, we haven't heard from you for a couple minutes. So why don't you hit that one first?
Sure. Yeah. I think we're like basically working two jobs is what was painful at the time. And I'm glad that we did, because we were able to use that time while we still had full-time jobs to really get to know the national market, to talk to everybody we knew and their brother about, like, are people interested in program evaluation? Would they pay us for that? And then once we got started, we were also able to, show up in spaces and give presentations and sort of doing that networking component as, like, brand new people in the nonprofit like community in Nashville. And I think that made all the difference. That it was very exhausting at the time. And I think that because we invested that time and energy is the reason why we have worked on referrals. Like, we were not having to spend a lot of time doing marketing, because people know who we are, because we hung around for like 2 years, showing up at every nonprofit shindig to meet people. So I think that it was rough, and I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, good point. Showing up is so important, and seeing people in person.
Yeah.
Iris, what's your thoughts about this? What's something you did that was difficult, perhaps difficult, but you're glad you did it?
Firing someone. It sucks. It's not fun when you have an underperformer on the team. It's not. I've got all sorts of new processes and warning systems and growth plans as a result of this, and I've had to do it more than once. But you have to do it. It's like putting on your big girl pants. It's not fun, but it's part of the job. You'll kill your whole team if you let it fester.
Kurt?
The first one, and it wasn't that painful, but it was time consuming, was converting from a sole proprietor taxed as a disregarded entity to moving to an LLC and being an S corporation. So I had to learn a lot about the IRS and learn about the state of Texas and LLCs and so on. But I hired people to do that. It was time consuming, but not painful. And the new one is the documenting the procedures. So like Iris just talked about some of the things, and Ian mentioned standard operating procedures. We're at that point where I've had some, and part of it was just because I forgot what steps I was doing. Like when we get a new contract on, it doesn't happen that often. So I forgot what the steps were. So I started writing them down just so I remembered what would happen. So it's documenting the project management part, documenting everything.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording here, but we're going to still keep talking. And I apologize because I looked down and I thought, oh my God, it's 51 past the hour. So with that, we're going to stop the recording here, but everybody stick around.